Welcome back to The Real Mr. Mom. I'm Seeds, and this is the video. It's going to be probably my most controversial video I've made so far. I usually like to talk about things that people might disagree with, but aren't going to be overtly ruffling feathers. This one's probably going to be a verbal, I'm not going to say verbal, a virtual hand grenade. And hopefully I don't hit anybody. But yes, so one of the things that I've just been watching throughout society is the disdain for U.S. history, and I don't mean that for everyone, and I don't mean that there's just a blatant disdain. Period. But there's definitely a lot of hate towards history and a lot of hate towards the development of this country, and it's not to say that hate or resentment is unwarranted. But again, it's just something where I'm not trying to poke holes in a ship and say, this history is horrible. Well, look at this history. I'm not doing the whole, your politician's imperfect so much. Just because my politician's imperfect, well, yours is too. And then it's like, well, you're telling me they both suck. You're not saying, and I'm not trying to do that towards everyone's history, but it's just a matter of giving people perspective of if we can be compassionate towards these people and their history and not shame them and not hold them accountable for their ancestors. I think that to me, that's how we need to look at it for the history in the United States. And again, rightfully so. I understand that, you look at the forefathers, and I think all of them had slaves. You look at the mentality and the human value that even like Abraham Lincoln had for black people in this country, and it was not good by today's standards, and yet I do think he was one of the greatest presidents we've ever had. But again, too, you look at white settlers, and again, too, you look at the shiesty behavior from the U.S. government back then, pushing Native Americans off of their land continuously, where we'd give them, reservation, and then we'd find out something valuable was there, then we'd displace them again, and so certainly these are all horrible things that shouldn't be good, or not shouldn't be good. They're all horrible things that shouldn't be approved. But again, this comes back to there's a difference between accepting something and approving it. Accepting it simply just means that it happens. Approving it means that you're okay with it. So again, just because you're accepting of history doesn't mean you're approving of it. But this is where I want to branch off. And again, I'm not trying to diminish other people's history or make people feel bad. But again, it's just something of perspective where this is true. And again, the atrocities that have happened in this country are true. But I don't hold anybody today accountable, and I don't hold them as somehow they can't take pride in their history. And so just to leap off from that subject, I'm on my father's mother side. I'm Spanish Costa Rican. And when I say Spanish Costa Rican, that's because I want to say it's like 3% of Costa Ricans are Spanish Costa Rican, 3% are native Costa Rican, and 94% are European. I had no idea until I wrote a paper in college about that. But anyhow, the reason that I have ancestors who are Spanish Costa Rican, and the reason that if you go to Central or South America, the vast majority of these countries and populations of these countries speak Spanish, is because hundreds of years ago, the country of Spain, who also sent Columbus to discover the New World, the country of Spain sent conquistadors, which is Spanish for conquerors, to Central and South America, along with the inhabiting islands, and just wiped out the natives. A big part of that was disease, but yes, so this conquest was taking place because of gold. There was legends of gold and cities of gold, and so they sent all these warriors to essentially just take the valuables and the land from the natives. And again, I'm not saying that this is something that people today should be held accountable of, but that's what I mean, is you look at the acceptance of immigration, which I do think we should be accepting of immigrants. You think of the acceptance of Spanish-speaking cultures. When they come to this country, people are saying they should be able to embrace their heritage, embrace their roots, and embrace their history, which I agree with. But again, this is the same history that conquered Central and South America. So I'm not fully understanding why white settlers are being persecuted, and again, sought to be, or not sought, but verbally accosted, and their ancestors who are living here are being held accountable, or at least some people think they should be held accountable, when we're not holding these same standards to Central and South Americans. Like I said, my ancestors on my grandmother's side, my Nona Julio, is Spanish Costa Rican. And the reason we spoke Spanish is because our ancestors were from Spain. And again, too, that would be the other things that I was watching I can't remember how long ago it was, but the movie, Disney movie, Moana. Again, it's a cute movie. I've heard back and forth on the cultural appropriation for like Halloween costumes or whatever, which that's a different subject. But anyhow, I think it's interesting. And again, I don't think there's anything wrong with reimagining something for the storytelling's sake. I don't think there's anything wrong with cheering something up because children are the ones who are absorbing it. And so again, I do think there's a certain level of polishing the edges of certain things until someone's mind is ready. Again, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a more patriotic type of history lessons, and then if you want to learn more about the gruesome detail of history, there's nothing wrong with that as well, because I don't think we should deprive knowledge to the masses. I just don't think we should just give them this overflow of knowledge and not understand why, and not understand the truth about it all. Because I do think that getting half of a truth or part of a truth is worse than getting none of it. Because if you're not given any of it, then you're at the very least not having negative impacts of half a truth. If you think, and again, this is something where I'm not trying to say that the tragedies and the atrocities that were committed in this country are totally fine because they happened elsewhere. I'm just trying to say that if we can look the other way and we can identify the importance of someone's history to them and to their culture, specifically like I was just discussing with Spanish culture, then we certainly should be able to see why European culture and European history shouldn't just be thrown out the window and said that it's the actions of these evil people. Because again, as I discussed, the Spanish did the exact same thing that all the other Europeans did. And why we don't associate them as the same, I would say is probably just because they say from my grandmother's side, we tan a little better, and our language is significantly different than most of Europe, because a lot of Europe countries were much more interacting with each other and much more intertwined. And then again too, so going over to the movie Moana, that was one of the things. And again, I'm not ragging on the movie or a culture of it, but Moana, I thought the funniest thing was when she so excitedly said, we were voyagers. That's our history. Our ancestors were voyagers. And I'm like, no, you were conquerors. You just, took a cruise ship to the places you were conquering. But that's the thing, is that if you go to, I want to say it's like Hawaii.org or something, if you go to their specific website that they have made for their history and for their culture, they even talk about how the Hawaiians' ancestors are Polynesian settlers. And again, it's like, I recognize that word settler somewhere. And again, it's just, like white settlers. And again, so I'm not saying that Polynesians, the Hawaiians, can't take pride in their culture, and I think that they should. I don't think that they should be ashamed of all of their history. I don't think that because certain things took place that are bad, that they have to just throw everything out the window and lose all of that. But that's the truth, is that if you go to Hawaii, they're not actually native Hawaiians. They're Polynesians. They're the ancestors were Polynesian settlers who took the land and killed the natives. So again, I'm not saying that these tragedies are somehow justified because everyone committed them, but I'm just saying that if we're going to deprive one person's history, shouldn't we deprive everyone's history? Are we not, so what would be the rebuttal to that? Why wouldn't we tear everyone's history down if we're going to tear the U.S. history down? So what I'm saying is I don't think we should tear anybody's history down. I don't think that we should 100% hide these atrocities. I don't think that, like I said, I was talking to a buddy a little while back, and he was telling me some very real, sad truths about George Washington, and he was saying, well, should we, teach this in history books? And I'm like, well, I don't think we should teach it in like standard, just 101, learning the fundamentals of U.S. history, but I do think that it should be an option for advanced history lessons. And again, too, I think it's just important to, if we're going to give this knowledge to somebody, to do it effectively, and just for them to realize the truth of all of it. Like I said, if we're going to have, the reality of U.S. history, I think it would be important to have the reality of world history, and just point out the atrocities of everyone's ancestors, not to do it to make them all feel bad, not to do it to say we all suck, and we can't take pride in our history and in our roots, but just to realize that in the world that they were living in, that's the sad reality of it. And I think that that's the sad thing too, is you can just see how much more advanced we are. You can see how far we've come as a people. Could you imagine 500 years ago, trying to explain, the UN? Could you imagine even just trying to explain the modern U.S. of the diversity we have of thought and of race and of just everything? I don't think we would have comprehended. I think that they probably would have thought we were all bewitched or something to have the reality we have today. And so again, that's lead to another subject I'm going to talk about next, is just how history is perceived by the people living it opposed to the people who living today. And so anyhow, so we'll talk about the history and just how it's perceived opposed to how it actually took place. Like I said, not trying to make anybody feel bad about their history, not trying to dump on anybody's history or say that the atrocities that have happened in this country are somehow okay because they've happened elsewhere. It's just simply a matter of, if you look at everyone's history, all of our ancestors have committed atrocities, and like I said, it's about learning from it. It's about realizing our mistakes. And I think too that there is plenty of good stuff that has happened while horrible things were happening. You look at the Revolutionary War, and slavery was very much alive and quote unquote it was flourishing, and yet you look at the Revolutionary War and what it led to. It led to democracy. It led to that sentiment that all men are created equal, and that expanded to freedom of slaves, and that expanded to more civil rights movements. And so again, it's just this progression where if the Revolutionary War hadn't happened, I'm sure that the abolishment of slavery would have been delayed. And so again, it's just one of those things where I'm not condoning the evil. I'm just saying that we shouldn't be able to not appreciate the good stuff because bad stuff was taking place as well. And again, as always, good luck. Good night.